maneuver, and the dividends of joy. The toxic, ash-choked mud of the northern flats didn't just splash against the hulls of the cargo loaders. Thanks to the complex physics engine I had painstakingly woven from the raw fabric of the void, it had weight. Every droplet of acidic rain that sizzled against rusted iron, every heavy thud of a hydraulic piston sinking into the mire, and every shuddering vibration of distant artillery was translated with absolute, pristine fidelity into the minds of the 50 humans currently piloting my industrial mechs. To a regular mortal inhabitant of this grim dark galaxy, the freezing rain, the suffocating atmosphere, and the thundering, relentless boom of Imperial artillery would be a psychological death sentence. It was an environment designed to crush the human spirit, to reduce men to weeping shells before they were inevitably obliterated by high-explosive ordnance. But to Trashcan and his squad of 5 heavy cargo loaders, it wasn't a nightmare. It was just immersive environmental storytelling. "Keep those RPMs up, boys. Don't let the torque drop." Trashcan's voice crackled through the local global chat, bursting with a level of pure, unadulterated dopamine that most people in this universe hadn't felt in millennia. "The terrain deformation out here is absolutely insane. Watch the ruts on the left. There's a massive crater from the last mortar shell. If you get stuck, you're throwing away your repair mats." From my quiet, detached vantage point within the singularity of absence, the view was nothing short of magnificent. I wasn't just watching a desperate battlefield defense. I was overseeing a highly efficient, industrial harvest. Every shout of excitement, every tense piece of tactical coordination over the comms, and every sudden surge of adrenaline from the players didn't bleed away into the warp to feed the dark gods. Instead, it bypassed the immaterium entirely, filtering straight into my system core as high-grade emotional value. Harvesting emotional value, plus 400 energy. Harvesting combat adrenaline, plus 350 energy. Current pool 1560/5000. Down on the jagged volcanic ridges, the faceless, trench-coated soldiers of the Imperium's artillery line were falling into complete disarray. Their officers had spent centuries training them to fight against shouting mutants, fanatical rebels, and terrifying alien horrors who screamed war cries into the dark. They were rigorously conditioned to face enemies that adhered to the terrifying, brutal laws of their reality. They were not, however, trained to fight 5 rust-covered, top-heavy construction mechs that were currently sprinting through a cratered valley at terrifying speeds, while their pilots argued loudly over an open channel about who got to claim the elite mob kills. "Flanking maneuver in 3, 2, 1, smash 'em," Trashcan roared. The heavy iron sally port doors of the fortress had barely finished hissing open before Trashcan's loader crested the volcanic ridge. The machine's massive hydraulic claws revved with a terrifying mechanical whine that echoed across the flats. The Imperial guardsmen barely had time to swing their heavy, tripod-mounted lasguns around before the heavy construction mechs slammed directly into the perimeter of the mortar pits. It wasn't a clean, disciplined military engagement. It was a chaotic mechanical brawling match. A cargo loader swung its massive, heavy-duty scrap metal arm, catching a heavy artillery piece dead center and sending the multi-ton weapon flipping through the air like a discarded toy. Right beside him, another player used their industrial plasma torch, a tool meant for cutting thick hull plates, to melt directly through a fortified bunker door. The player laughed maniacally as the game interface I had projected into their retinas flashed a bright text prompt: "Critical strike, devastating damage." "Oh, the melting animation on the bunker doors is beautiful," the player, whose tag read Meltdown, shouted to his squad mates. "The devs really went all out on the particle effects. I'm melting these guys like butter." Up in the fortress's high tower, Goblin provided lethal, pinpoint overwatch. Every time an Imperial officer tried to rally the retreating guardsmen or fix a heavy weapon position, a high-caliber solid slug from Goblin's jury-rigged sniper rifle cracked through the heavy smog. The rounds hit with terrifying precision, dropping targets instantly. "Boom, headshot, that's another 500 XP, Goblin cheered over the global feed, his avatar adjusting the bolt of the heavy rifle with practiced ease. "Man, the hitboxes in this game are so crisp. There's zero latency. I don't care how bleak the sky looks, this is the best shooter I've played in a decade." I allowed myself a cold, quiet smile within the safety of the void. Let the galaxy look upon this rapidly growing fortress and see a terrifying ghost from the dark age of technology. Let the local Imperial commanders report a higher dimensional threat that defies their tactical maps and ignores their conventional psychic detection. The grander the lie, the more complex the misunderstanding, the safer my anomalous empire became. Unlike the rotting corpse bound to the golden throne, or the ravenous, chaotic entities that writhed within the warp, I had no desire to feast upon the souls of these mortals. Eating souls was a finite, messy, and fundamentally destructive currency that drew the immediate, unwanted attention of rival gods. But the pure, renewable energy of a human mind determined to win a harsh survival grind. That was an infinite, self-sustaining power source. By providing them a game, I was tapping into a wellspring of power they gave willingly, joyfully, and without losing their lives. As the last of the mortar crews broke formation, abandoning their heavy positions and retreating into the toxic fog of the northern flats, a massive, gold-bordered system prompt echoed in the minds of every player on the battlefield and inside the fortress walls. World event cleared, the siege of the northern flats. Base integrity restored to 98%. Total materials gathered, 4,200/10,000. Total energy harvested, 3,850/5,000. Server cap expanded, 50/100 players, deploying Wave 2. "We did it," Trashkin yelled, kicking his cockpit door open and climbing out onto the smoking hull of a wrecked Imperial tank. He began performing a ridiculous, perfectly synchronized victory dance that his neural link translated flawlessly into the physical world. "Look at the loot drops, guys. We got high-grade plasteel, weapon components, and some kind of rare heavy chemical fuel. Get the salvage crew out here ASAP before the corpses despawn." "They don't despawn, idiot. It's a realistic survival game," Goblin corrected over the radio, though his voice was equally triumphant. "But the materials will definitely degrade if we leave them in the acid rain. Come on, scrapper specs, do your thing." Back at the fortress courtyard, the atmosphere was electric. The newly expanded server cap was already taking effect. Deep within the central staging area, 50 new blue pillars of light erupted from the stone floor as the second wave of players initialized their avatars. These weren't seasoned veterans of the first hour. These were fresh, eager minds who had clicked on my digital advertisements back on Earth, lured by the promise of an uncompromised, hyper-realistic alpha test. "Whoa, look at the scale of this place," one new player whispered, stepping out of the light and immediately reaching down to touch the gritty, realistic texture of the concrete floor. "The physics are crazy. I can actually feel the chill in the air." "Hey, new blood," a veteran scrapper shouted from the top of a massive pile of salvaged metal girders. "Grab a plasma cutter and get over to the refinery hopper. We're trying to hit the 10,000 material threshold to unlock Tier 2 tech. If you want to get out of those basic jumpsuits and into a cargo loader, you better start grinding." The response was immediate. Without a single complaint about the grueling labor, the bleak, oppressive weather, or the distant, ominous rumbling of a hostile world, the new players threw themselves into the work. They coordinated through the global chat channels, laughing, forming temporary guilds, and mastering the heavy, deliberate physics of the industrial tools. To them, the bleakness wasn't depressing, it was the ultimate hardcore aesthetic. High above the physical carnage and the bustling industriousness of the courtyard, wrapped in the cold safety of my divine void, I watched my resource pools skyrocket. The Imperium had sent an expeditionary force to eliminate a minor blind spot on their tactical maps, but they had accomplished nothing more than feeding the very machine they sought to destroy. The true grind had just begun, and the foundations of the Antherise Empire were hardening into something unyielding. But a collection of human players, no matter how dedicated to the grind, still required a narrative anchor. They needed an explicit purpose, a central figure to fight for, and a symbol that would solidify the lie we were presenting to the galaxy. If the surrounding factions believed this fortress was merely an automated outpost, they would eventually send an overwhelming armada to cleanse it. But if they believed it was the sovereign territory of a terrifying, higher-dimensional power, they would hesitate. They would recalculate. The sudden, massive spike in harvested divine fuel was vibrating violently through my core, stabilizing my control over physical reality to an unprecedented degree. It was time to manifest the true focal point of our faction. Deep within the silent depths of the singularity of absence, I began to forge her. I didn't use the messy, volatile energy of the warp to create a typical demon. Instead, I crafted a being of absolute negation, a superblank, a creature so utterly severed from the immaterium that her mere presence would cause a psychic vacuum, extinguishing the souls of nearby psychers and blinding the warp-based sensors of any starship in orbit. Yet within the physical realm, she would possess an entirely different brand of terror. I wove the laws of localized gravity into her very essence, giving her the ability to manipulate space itself, to create miniature, devastating singularities with nothing more than a tilt of her head or a flick of her wrist. She would be a beautiful, silent storm of absolute destruction, capable of collapsing an entire battlefield into a localized black hole if the situation demanded it. She would be the front character, the absolute leader of the Antherise Empire in the eyes of the players, and a terrifying anomaly to the rest of the galaxy. As the final points of energy fused into her newborn core, the space directly above the fortress refinery began to distort. The air grew impossibly heavy, the toxic rain freezing instantly into dark, suspended crystals as a silent, terrifying pressure descended upon the courtyard. The players stopped their work, their tools lowering as they looked up in absolute awe. The Empress was about to make her first appearance. You have reached the end of the text.